An explosion in the Nigerian capital kills dozens of people. It's the latest in a series of devastating attacks. But Nigeria is not alone. The rise of armed groups across Africa. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. At least 21 people have been killed during a bomb attack at a busy shopping district in the Nigerian capital, Abuja. Although no one has claimed responsibility so far, it's similar to other attacks carried out by the armed group Boko Haram. And Jazeera's Yvonne Dege has more now from Abuja.
The bomb hit a popular mall for electronic goods in Abuja, just as people were getting ready to watch Nigeria play Argentina at the World Cup on the many TV screens for sale inside. Parts of the building were completely destroyed by the impact of the explosion and many windows blown out. Witnesses told us they saw body parts scattered around the entrance of the mall, which took the worst of the force of the blast, and many cars parked outside were destroyed.
I lost a driver. And why? Because I came to photocopy for 10 naira. A page. I lost a driver that has 3 wives and 8 children. And this driver is not supposed to bring me here, but I forced him. I begged him to take me here. And this is the end. And these children, they are going to school. He's the one taking care of his family and the children. How are we going to do with the children?
Emergency services arrived on the scene to rescue the injured and remove the dead. The area was then cordoned off by the police and military as bomb squad experts combed the area for more devices. At the scene, the police said it was too early to say who or what caused the explosion.
You can all see that we just recorded an unfortunate bomb blast here. For now, we cannot tell you much. We can't tell you the nature or perhaps the kind of explosion that was used.
No group has claimed responsibility for the bombing, but it does look like the group Boko Haram might be behind it. They blew up this bus station in Abuja in April, killing more than 75 people. Days later, they struck again, killing dozens.
We are Boko Haram.
In this video, released in April, Abubakar Shekau, the group's leader, promises to attack the capital again and again. The group want a strict form of Islamic law imposed throughout the country and have been behind many bombings since 2009. Nigeria's security services insist they're winning the war against Boko Haram, but say these kinds of attacks are difficult to stop. An investigation has been launched into the cause of the explosion and security beefed up across the capital. Yvonne Dege, Al Jazeera, Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, despite the state of emergency in northern Nigeria, which was put in place a year ago, Boko Haram fighters are increasing their attacks. In May, twin car bombs in the central city of Jos killed more than 130 people. The previous month, more than 120 were also killed at a busy bus station in 2 separate explosions in Abuja. And on the same day, Boko Haram kidnapped more than 200 schoolgirls from Borno State, drawing international condemnation. So lots to talk about then. Let's bring in our guests. In Abuja, we have Shehu Sani, president of the Civil Rights Congress of Nigeria. Sani has mediated between the Nigerian government and Boko Haram. In London, A.O. Johnson, director of Viewpoint Africa, and in Hartford, in the U.S. state of Connecticut, we're joined by Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solutions. Good to have you all with us, gentlemen. A.O. Johnson, just how powerful a threat is Boko Haram right now? Because they are increasingly, with all of these attacks that have happened just in the last couple of months, able to strike at will whenever they want, wherever they want.
They are indeed a massive force, one that the Nigerian government has come to realize over many months and at least many years. They've attacked at will. They've shown that the Nigerian security forces have been unable to stop them. The intelligence has failed. And to an extent, they have really been a thorn in the side of Goodluck Jonathan's administration. And ultimately, many Nigerians feel that they don't feel safe. They believe that their lives are being put at risk. They're not sure whether they'll be kidnapped or whether there'll be a bomb attack or ultimately whether their lives will be lost. So I think the bottom line here is that Boko Haram has showed many frailty for which the Nigerian government and the security forces have to be blamed. And ultimately, many Nigerians are asking very vital questions. When will the government start taking Boko Haram seriously?
Yeah, let's talk more about the security forces and where they fit into all of this. I mean, are they part of the problem? The accusations of corruption within the government and within the security forces, accusations of brutality and the rest of it, aren't they? Isn't there legitimate criticism that they are almost become a recruiting tool for Boko Haram?
I think the Nigerian intelligence has failed. The security forces have shown an inept. Of course, Boko Haram has shown these frailties, but the amount of money that Nigeria has, we must remember that it's one of the third most popular countries across the entire African continent for foreign direct investment. You have an economy that's doing reasonably well. There's billions of nairas that's been poured into the army, for which the army should have sophisticated weaponry to be able to tackle this problem. But yet still we find in places where Boko Haram seems to have the upper hand, better weaponry, sometimes outmanning the security forces, and showing Nigeria for its frailty, which for a country of its size, for its capabilities, very, very poor indeed.
Well, why is that? Why is Boko Haram so much better equipped than Johnson, than the government forces, if so much money is being poured into them? Because it kind of begs the question from a lot of people: the money is just not going to the right places; it's being pocketed.
Well, corruption raises its ugly head again, for which many politicians will have to be blamed, for which many Nigerians will say, yet again, we are being victims, and of course the world sees us as not being able to address our own affairs internally. But I believe that the Nigerian government, as far as it's concerned, has done its best, be it that they've come short. And of course, short means that Boko Haram has had the upper hand, and ultimately Nigeria has had to go out to the world to ask for help, or at least accept help, which is what's happening now. And many Nigerians are proud people, and they want to be able to do things on their own, and that's not happening. And of course, Goodluck Jonathan will bear a brunt of that. But for him, he thinks that for now, at least, he's shouldering the responsibilities that he's carried out for so long with so many others worldwide.
Sheikh Hussaini, as we said at the top there, you have been involved in mediating a dialogue between the Nigerian government and Boko Haram. But if you talk to a lot of people in Nigeria that are reeling from all of these attacks, they will say that Boko Haram doesn't seem to be interested in any form of dialogue at this point. So what's the point?
Well, if a country is faced with this kind of insurgency, I've said it consistently, that there are two ways to approach it. The first is to use force, and the second is to explore the options of dialogue. Now, in the last 3 to 4 years, since this violence has escalated, there were attempts at dialogue which was frustrated by elements within the cycle of government who still believe that the use of force could end the activities of the group. But it is very clear to us that the use of force has not been able to crush or contain the insurgency. And people like me, who are non-state actors, still believe that the initial peace talks that was initiated in the first and second instance, which was frustrated by elements in the government, need to be explored, because it's very clear to us that the violence is moving away from the northeastern part of Nigeria to the central part of Nigeria and moving down south. And if care is not taken, there is no part of the country that is safe and beyond the reach of the insurgents. So it is simply about exploring other ways to which this insurgency could be contained.
Daniel Wagner, I saw you nodding in agreement to some of that. Is that a point of view that you find common ground in?
Well, I do find some common ground in the concept. I do find myself wondering, however, how effective dialogue can be with a group that really doesn't want to talk to you and isn't really invested in the peace process. This raises a larger question, and that is, how effective are governments in actually combating such problems? Very difficult. It doesn't matter who's at the helm, whether it's Goodluck Jonathan or Mr. Kenyatta in Kenya. They're battling a similar problem. They're presiding over states that are basically kleptocracies. And when that is the case, and when corruption is so rampant, it doesn't matter what you try to do, it's not going to work, because the effectiveness of your security forces is going to be eroded, and you're just not going to be able to have the range of options that you would otherwise have if that were not the case.
Well, we're going to expand on this now, and the idea that these are similar problems that are taking place in a number of African countries. Wednesday's attack in Abuja was a stark reminder of the growing threat of hardline groups in Africa. The Somali armed group Shabaab is growing stronger and continues to cross the region's borders with some ease. Last week it carried out a machete attack in a village on Kenya's east coast. 65 people were killed there. Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb is also gaining traction in parts of Mali, Niger and Algeria. Other groups linked to Al-Qaeda can also be found in some of the countries you see here in this graphic, as well as in countries including the Central African Republic and Libya. So if I come back to you then, Daniel Wagner, and expand on this, and I know you've written a piece on this, about this, in which you talk about this, what you call a coalition of African failed states. Obviously, there are similar characteristics for which you group all of these states under. Just expand on that a little, as far as what the problems that they share.
It is the continent that has the most failed states of any continent in the world. 15 of the top 20 failed states in the world are in Africa, and it basically goes from West Africa straight through to East Africa. The issue there is that when the problem is so pervasive, it becomes regional. It becomes not just a national, but a transnational problem. You have porous borders, you have fighting forces which are ineffective because of the large swaths of territory, limited resources that can be applied to the problem. Whether it's Mali or Nigeria, Somalia or Kenya, these entities, they cross borders at will. They attack at will. And when that is the case, there's really nothing that a government can do about it. The problem at its core is poverty. It's a lack of ability to make progress in life for the average person. And that feeds into what these groups are trying to accomplish. When they're meeting the basic needs of the people and their own governments are not meeting those basic needs, the people are saying basically, well, what have I got to lose?
A.O. Johnson, you think that's what's at the heart of all of this, poverty and corruption?
Well, groups like Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab and so many others worldwide work on the margins of society. And that said, they're feeding on vulnerable people who are already either living on $1 a day or thereabout. And it's intimidation and fear which allows them to be able to recruit, hold on to people, and at times be able to be protected by those same people. I think we're looking at potentially a generation lost that's not coming back. And it will be that generation, if we were to change that, we would have to start working with the new generation, the youths of today, to make sure that they're not enticed by groups like Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab and so many others. Ultimately, we must also be very concerned that jihadists worldwide all seem to have a similar blueprint. They have a similar calling, a similar focus for Sharia state and Sharia law. But ultimately, just as Goodluck Jonathan has been able to rally people around the world to come and support him, the United States, Britain and so many others, and so could these groups. Groups like Boko Haram could call out to other jihadists, and Nigeria could now become the forefront for the fight against the West, as we've seen in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. So there is a concern and a worry as these groups intensify, their numbers increase, their popularities to some areas of the world become that much more. It's a huge worry that containing the problem may be out of the reach of the West, out of the reach of some of these African countries, for which many are very impoverished and living in very, very poor conditions right now.
Oh, I want to just pick up on that, A.O. Johnson. What about the idea that countries in the West like the United States and France and Britain and so on should just stay out of it, let this play out? Because there's an argument for that in much of what's happening in the Middle East right now, of course. Does that apply to Africa as well, do you think? Or is it better for countries like this to do something, whether it's further economic aid or military aid?
Taking sides, interference, as one would call it, has its ramifications and problems. On one hand, you can see, like in terms of Libya, getting rid of Gaddafi has led to a country that's now become the Wild West in terms of anarchy and chaos. We see in Central African Republic where Muslims are fighting against Christians, likewise vice versa, sectarian violence. So we see the possibility of interference, as you've described it, in Nigeria, with Boko Haram. It could be a good thing for Goodluck Jonathan having to have support from the West, having better sophisticated weaponry, having better intelligence, knowing that he's not alone facing this threat. But that in itself means that he's exposing Nigeria to a potential bigger problem for which jihadists worldwide could rally, focus, and then who knows where Nigeria can become in terms of how we've seen how countries like Afghanistan and Iraq have evolved over time. It's a dangerous strategy, but I think people like Goodluck Jonathan, president of Goodluck Jonathan, who finds himself in a bind. On one hand, he can't refuse help because he's in a position where he needs help. He's shown that his security forces have shown an inept to be able to deal with the problem. So many girls being taken, so many villages and towns being attacked at will, that cannot continue. And of course, more recently, the capital being attacked in the fashion it has, with the shopping mall being attacked. So I think we're in a bittersweet situation. On one hand, the president would have to seek help, but that comes with problems.
Sheikh Hussaini, it does look, doesn't it, that we're at a real crossroads here in terms of the best way to deal with all of this, not only in Nigeria, but throughout the region.
Yeah, it is very clear that terrorism and this kind of insurgency is not only a problem to Nigeria, but to countries within the continent, particularly Kenya, Somalia, and other countries. But the peculiarity of the Nigerian case is that we are a country of almost 170 million people. And if Nigeria fails, certainly all the countries in West Africa will fail, because none of them could contain a humanitarian situation in Nigeria. And the way forward for this problem, I believe, is to address the root cause of it. And that root cause simply has to do with the short-term and long-term solution. And the short-term solution is to apply force and at the same time reach out to them and talk to them. We have seen how the IRA insurgency was brought to an end.
Is there not a contradiction in that, applying force
and there were times which people were saying, there were times where, excuse me, hold on, there were times people were saying that it's impossible to talk to Taliban, it was impossible to talk to FARC rebels in Colombia. But talking is going on, and the problem, hopefully, will be addressed. So I still believe that reaching out to the insurgent, despite what is happening, is also another way of ending the problem.
What about the argument, Sheikh Hussaini, that talking to them may only embolden them further, that they'll be made to feel that they're getting somewhere here if they're given a seat at the table, to a dialogue seat?
You see, there have been difference of opinion between people who live in the north, particularly the northeast, where this violence is at its highest point, and people who are far away from the flashpoints. As far as the residents of those flashpoints areas are concerned, they simply want an end to the problem, whatever formula is being adopted. But if you don't live there, you live very far away from it. You have the convenience of sitting down in an air-conditioned room and giving a hypothetical prediction of what will happen if this happens. So what is most important here is that this violence has consumed thousands of lives, and people there want an end to this violence and a restoration of peace. Nigeria is not a failed state, but we have problems and challenges, and I believe that if the right things are done, we will overcome all these problems. But I know very well that we have passed through a period of civil war and challenges after civil war, and we are able to overcome it. So I don't believe that this problem is going to be here with us forever. But all that is needed is for the government to use the other option, which they are using now, at the same time explore the option of giving those of us who still believe that they can initiate a process that will end this group the chance to do it. 2 times we have initiated it, and we found the government frustrating us. And I still believe that in as much as other conflicts, other parts of the world will end through negotiation, we can also do it here.
I want to go back to A.O. Johnson, get his view on this, because you were shaking your head to some of that.
The bottom line, I think the sledgehammer approach may or may not work. Because on one hand, negotiating with this group in the past, the idea was so, as far as the government is concerned, Nigerian government is concerned, they're so distanced away in terms of ideology that there's no common ground. And I believe that Boko Haram has crossed the red line of no return. The numbers of people that have been killed, the frequency of the bombings, of course, holding on to these young children for so long and even taking more, showing a weak spot from the government perspective, makes it very difficult to be able to negotiate with this group, and I just don't believe that they can be negotiated with because we are so far in terms of poles apart, in terms of ideology and what they've done already. I don't think Nigerians would ever forgive them. But they have a carrot and a stick approach. On one hand, they have the girls, and I'm sure they will use those girls to negotiate their way out of trouble and negotiate probably the freedom of some of their fighters who are in Nigerian jails. But then lies the problem itself. They will keep on fighting. What's been shown quite clear is that Boko Haram will not stop. Nothing will stop what they are focused on. The only thing that will stop them would be if they're taken out. And then for you to take them out, you need your intelligence to be at its best to find out where they are.
Daniel Wagner, when you look at groups like Boko Haram in Nigeria and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, there's an argument that says these are localized groups with local goals, and to try to lump them all in the same category and come up with a kind of one-size-fits-all way of dealing with them is the wrong approach. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I do agree that there has to be some customization to the approach, but I think I want to pick up on some points that were made earlier. And that is that when you're negotiating with organizations like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab, and you're not negotiating from a position of strength, it's very different than if you are negotiating from a position of strength. And so to make a comparison, for example, with the Taliban or, for instance, negotiating with Iran, very, very different here. It's Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram that are actually negotiating from a position of strength, and that's why they're not anxious to get to the negotiating table. I think what they all have in common is that until state forces can mount an effective opposition to what is going on, I'm not even sure I see a reason to be going to the negotiating table, because when you're negotiating from a position of weakness, you don't end up with the result that you want to get.
I want to come back to you, Sheikh Hussaini, if you want to respond to what you've just heard there, the idea that things have gone beyond any kind of negotiation at the moment.
Well, I have had such analysis and commentaries. It's just like the Chibok girls that are currently in captivity with the insurgents. The insurgents said they want a swap. So what is needed is simply for the government to swap these insurgents with their members and their family members who are in detention. But the argument is that if you do that, it will encourage more kidnappings. But kidnapping is still going on right after the Chibok girls. And if the Israel could swap some Palestinians for one of their soldiers, and if the United States could swap some Talibans with one of their soldiers, I don't see the reason why Nigerians should not be able to swap, because you cannot adopt or apply any military approach with those girls still on the crosshair with the insurgents.
All right, on that we are going to have to leave it. Thank you to all of our guests, Sheikh Hussaini in Abuja, A.O. Johnson in London, and Daniel Wagner in Hartford. Good discussion. Thanks for your time. And do please let us know your thoughts as well. You can add your voice to the discussion at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or why not tweet us? Go to @AJ Inside Story. I'm Hazem Seeker. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.